World War I, one of the bloodiest wars in human history. A whole generation of young men fed into the meat grinder of industrial war. It changed the shape of the world, birthing new nations from the corpses of dying empires, led to the rise of new and extreme ideologies, and ultimately lay the groundwork for a much bloodier war. This is Basic History on World War I. Europe in the 1900s was tense, to say the very least. France was still smarting from their loss to Prussia, now Germany, and the loss of Alsace and Lorraine. Germany was looking to become the continental power and also to build up a navy to rival that of Great Britain, which, as you can imagine, the Brits were not happy about. Russia had suffered a humiliating loss to Japan in 1905 and had failed to come to the aid of their fellow Slavs in the Balkans, and was feeling pressurized to prove it remained a great power. On top of all this, Russia was also in the midst of a massive rearmament program that had Germany very nervous. Italy had territorial ambitions against both of France and Austria-Hungary, and while nominally allied to the Central Powers, that was defensive in nature only. Austria-Hungary, meanwhile, it was a bit of a mess. Their Balkan provinces were in the process of realizing that they were in fact the Balkans and peace was never an option, with many other ethnicities such as Italians, Poles, Romanians, Ukrainians and others all also bitter about imperial oppression. Lastly, we have the so-called sick man of Europe, the Ottoman Empire. Booted out of its European provinces and gradually losing ground to its historic rival Russia, while also dealing with rising nationalism in much of its empire, the Ottomans were seen by many to be a house of cards that a stiff breeze could blow over. This was the web of tensions leading into 1914, a web that would break apart with disastrous results for the countries involved. The spark that would ignite this particular powder keg was the murder of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the throne of Austria-Hungary, on June 28 in Sarajevo. Assassinated while travelling through a very tumultuous region in an open-top car, top tier thinking there, bud, by Gavrilo Princip, a Serbian nationalist. This caused Austria-Hungary to deliver an ultimatum to Serbia, who had accused of orchestrating the assassination. Serbia denied these claims and rejected the ultimatum, and just like that, the dominoes began to fall. Germany promised to back the Austro-Hungarians if they attacked Serbia, while Russia promised to defend the Serbs. France was allied to Russia, and so everyone started mobilizing their armies for full-scale war. The war began on July 28, 1914, when Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia. In short order, they would cross the border and begin shelling Belgrade. The Serbs would fight back magnificently, however, and despite the difference in materiel and men, the Serbians would successfully hold off the Austro-Hungarian army. While Germany was on the move. See, Germany had a problem. With France and Russia allied, it faced the prospect of a two-front war. But it also had a plan to avoid this, the Schlieffen Plan. This plan called for Germany to quickly mobilize its troops, march on France and crush them, then redirect everything it had towards Russia before they could help their French ally. With speed being so important, the German High Command had to bypass the highly defended French frontiers, and its only option to do so was through neutral Belgium. Germany issued a demand to be allowed safe passage, Belgium refused, and Germany invaded, leading to what would be called the Rape of Belgium. Great Britain, who had to this point not declared for either side, had a treaty to protect Belgian neutrality, and so they declared war on Germany, and the BEF, the British Expeditionary Force, would soon be in France. Perhaps more importantly, this also brought the incredibly powerful Royal Navy into play, and Germany would find itself under naval blockade in short order. The arrival of the British would not be enough to save Belgium, which, despite fighting hard and having strong fortifications, were forced back to a narrow strip of Belgian land. The Germans quickly put the French and British to flight too, who in short order were back on French soil and scrambling to protect Paris. With the Germans advancing southward, a gap opened in their lines, right in front of the BEF, who almost literally just walked between two German armies. With this, the Allies managed to push back the Germans in the Battle of the Marne. The casualties from these battles were absolutely staggering. In the Battle of the Marne, over 500,000 men were casualties on all sides, with artillery and machine guns wreaking havoc on columns of infantry moving in the open. This caused both sides to begin digging in. The trenches of the Western Front were beginning to form. Over in the east, things did not start so well for the Germans. The Russians mobilised much faster than anyone expected and soon had hundreds of thousands of troops in East Prussia. This took German high command by surprise and spelled disaster for their war effort if allowed to continue unchecked. These two giant Russian armies split while advancing west and were annihilated in the battles of Tannenberg and the Masurian Lakes, where the Russian 1st and 2nd armies were completely routed, saving eastern Germany. The Russians had more luck further south against Austria-Hungary. They battered aside the Austro-Hungarian forces and had occupied Galicia and pushed up into their Carpathian Mountains in short order. Japan, honouring its treaty with Great Britain, declared war on Germany on August 7th and soon had the port of Tsingtao under siege. With fighting also breaking out amongst the European colonies in Africa, and with German and British ships clashing near the Falkland Islands in the South Atlantic, this war can now truly be called a world war. Staying with Africa for the moment, I want to talk about this guy, Colonel Paul von Lettow-Vorbeck, a German commander in East Africa who led an incredibly successful guerrilla campaign for the entirety of the war, tying down thousands of British troops, all while completely cut off from any kind of support. It remains to this day one of the greatest guerrilla campaigns ever waged. On the 31st of October, the two historic enemies, Russia and the Ottoman Empire, declared war on each other. This came about a few days after the Ottoman Empire had shelled Russian Black Sea ports, and it seems this came about because of the will of one man in particular, Enver Pasha, just one of many figures who led to the outbreak of this war and never faced any consequences for the millions of men he led to death. Back on the Western Front, both sides began pushing north towards the English Channel in an attempt to outflank each other. This became known as the Race to the Sea, an ending failure for both sides, and would leave them facing each other in trenches going from the English Channel all the way down to Switzerland. On December 2nd, Austria-Hungary finally captured Belgrade, the capital of Serbia. However, on the 18th, the Serbs launched a determined counterattack and retook Belgrade and much of their country. The Serbs had fought hard and would continue to do so, but at devastating cost. By the end of the war, an estimated 1.1 million of them would be dead, 25% of the pre-war population. On the 25th of December, on the Western Front, a temporary and unofficial truce occurred, as men from both sides exited their trenches to share food, cigarettes, and even play a game of football. This show of solidarity is a rare bright spot in a year that had already seen the deaths of tens of thousands of young men, millions of civilians dislocated, cities razed to the ground, and with no end in sight. Join us next time when we'll bring the war that was meant to be over by Christmas into 1915.